guys, so welcome back to my channel. If you're new, hi, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. So today I'm going to be talking about something. It's not going to be a funny video. It's going to be a little creepy and more serious. I've been watching a ton of like Investigation Discovery lately. I'm obsessed with that channel, and I just find like serial killers and everything really interesting, and it kind of reminded me of something that happened last year, which, if you read the title of this video, was my neighbor getting murdered. She was murdered pretty brutally. It was terrifying because I lived alone at the time and it was a completely random act. So I'm going to tell you the story. I did post a video a while back, like right after it happened, like right after I talked to the news channel, because I was really shaken up from the whole thing, and the murderer was still on the loose at the time, so I was just really freaked out. I was scared, and I made the mistake of like putting the video up at that time, and I shouldn't have done that because a lot of people were actually like finding my address and they were sending out my address, and it was just like really disrespectful in my opinion to do that. So I ended up taking the video down, and I just kind of felt it was a little too soon to talk about it as well. Not like any of her family members watch my videos, I'm sure. So basically I'm like, I can't believe I haven't talked about this on my channel, because it was such a bizarre and random and terrible act, like, and I never thought it would happen to me. Like, it didn't really happen to me, I know that. Like, it happened to my poor neighbor, who should still be alive, by the way, but it was just a traumatizing experience for me. That's just what it was. I didn't expect to live that close to someone who could be capable of murdering you like that. Like, it was just really scary. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I want to make that very clear. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to this woman, but I just felt awful. Like, nobody deserves what happened to her to happen to them. So I do talk about this kind of thing on my channel, and it would be a little absurd if I didn't talk about it, since it pretty much happened next door to me. So I think it was like in the springtime that this happened. I woke up on a Friday morning to boom, boom, boom on my door, like pounding on my door. Like, I was like, who the fuck is that? I got out of bed, I went to the door, and it was two cops, and I was like, hello. I literally had like my eyelash like hanging off my face, and they're like, hi, we just have to ask you some questions. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what did I do? Like, oh my god, did I get drunk and do something I don't remember? Like, what the fuck? And so they're asking me like, where were you last night? Like, what did you do last night around like 10 o'clock p.m.? And I was like, well, I got home from work around that time, and then I think I just like watched videos and went to sleep. They were like, okay, so you weren't like, you didn't hear anything? And I was like, no, like, should I have heard something? And they were just being really weird about the entire thing, and they wouldn't tell me anything that went on. So I'm like, okay, like, I, was just hanging out, but can you tell me what happened? Because obviously something happened and I'm getting a little creeped out. And the guy's like, well, we can't tell you what happened, but we can tell you that there's been a death. And I'm like, what, like an OD, or like, did someone kill somebody? And they're like, we can't tell you. All we can tell you is that there's been a death. And I was like, what the fuck? Because I'm like a 25-year-old girl. I live in a basement floor apartment, by the way, by myself. And let me just tell you, I did not live in a good area. I lived in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It's all out there now. I don't live there anymore, so I don't give a shit if you guys know. I lived in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Plymouth has like a couple bad areas, and I was in like, here's the lowest. I was on like the second up from that like worst area to live in Plymouth. It was pretty bad. A bunch of my neighbors were like doing drugs. It was just a sketchy area. So for me to live on the basement floor of a sketchy apartment complex and then them tell me that there's a death. I was a little bit uncomfortable with that. I was like, okay, so you can't tell me anything else? And they're like, no, but I just don't want you to be worried. I'm like, well, obviously I'm gonna be worried. You're telling me there's a death, but you're being really sketchy. So, you know, that was that. They ended up leaving, and I heard them go upstairs and ask my upstairs neighbors the same exact question. So I'm like, who the fuck died? Like, I'm so confused. I wrote it off as like a drug overdose, and I just assumed that's what it was, because like what really happened, I would just never have thought that was possible. So the whole day goes by. The next day I go to work and I come home around like 4:30, and there is like 5 news trucks, like the most popular news stations in Boston, at my apartment complex. And I'm like, fuck that, like I'm not dealing with this. I'm going to go ask them what the fuck happened, because like the cops can't tell me what happened. I go over to the news trucks and I see ABC News and I go over to them and I'm like, can you tell me what happened, because the cops won't tell me, and like obviously you guys know what happened, so like what's going on? I want to know what went down. And they were like, oh, you didn't hear? And I was like, no, can you tell me? And they were like, okay, well, your neighbor, who is 86 years old, she's a Quincy College professor, she was stabbed in the face and neck 36 times by her 24-year-old neighbor, like random neighbor. So I was like horrified. I did not expect them to tell me that. I thought they were just gonna tell me that somebody OD'd, and like I know that's still bad, but like at least that would have been like self-inflicted. This was like, this poor woman like did not deserve that. Like nobody deserves that. And basically the guy was missing. So the 24-year-old guy fled, and he had just murdered her and left her there. And nobody noticed. Nobody in her building called the police. Nobody called 911. It was at 11 o'clock at night. She was obviously screaming or making a lot of noise, because no one gets murdered and doesn't scream, you know what I mean? So the fucked up part is that like no one in her building called the police, and when they were interviewed, they did say that they heard screaming, but they just assumed that somebody else would call the police. And there is other cases like this. There is a case, Kitty, I can't remember the last name, but this was like a long time ago. She was getting stabbed to death out in the street and nobody called the police. Like this reminded me so much of that case. And so she was stabbed to death and nobody called the police. Nobody would have called the police either, because the only reason they knew that she was dead or something was wrong was because she didn't show up to work at the school the next day at Quincy College. So somebody, I think, called someone to check on her. I don't remember who found her, but it was terrible. I just felt so awful. So you would think that there must have been a motive, there must have been an altercation. They don't really know what happened, because the only other person is the murderer, and I'll get into that. But it was, for some reason they thought that it was over a cigarette. They thought that maybe he asked her for a cigarette, or she asked him for a cigarette, or something to do with smoking in the building. I don't know what it was, but supposedly it was over a cigarette that he had all this rage towards her. He lived there for 2 weeks, so he didn't know this woman, you know, from a hole in the wall. He did not know her at all. He was not like a former angry student. That's what I thought, like maybe that was why. He didn't know her. It was completely random, and he was completely mentally unstable. This person had no previous record of doing anything illegal, so he was able to get his apartment by himself. But the scariest thing to me, and mainly the reason I wanted to make this video, was because he just walked into her apartment. It wasn't out in an alley, it wasn't, you know, getting out of her car at night. It was in the safety of her own home. He just walked in and killed her because the door was unlocked. And it just fucks me up, that it like makes me upset that nobody called the police for this poor woman while she's screaming for her life. Like that really shook me to my core, because I thought like if that happened to me, was someone really gonna let me like just like lay there and rot for 24 hours? Like, I was really fucked up after that, because I just thought like, how awful, how could you do that? Like, I would immediately call the police if that was me and I heard someone screaming like that. Like, what the fuck? And so now it was like, okay, we need to find this guy who just fucking killed this lady who didn't do anything. And so they were looking all over Massachusetts, and they found his car in some random ass town in Connecticut. So he had like parked his car and it was near a bridge. So then they started thinking like he either A, parked his car and like booked it and made it seem like he jumped off the bridge, or he actually jumped off the bridge. And I'm happy about this, that they did find him in the water. I think it was like a month after, but they did find him in the water dead. And I'm happy that he was dead, because it's like, you don't deserve to live after doing that to somebody, and you certainly don't deserve to be paid for with my fucking tax money, you asshole. Like, hell no, you're gonna fucking rot in hell where you belong. I was already scared living alone. It was kind of near the woods, so it was like not the like safest. It wasn't in a good neighborhood, like I said. Like, I lived in a fucking ghetto ass neighborhood when I lived in Plymouth. Like, that's just what it was. And I'm kind of happy I did that, because it taught me a lot. Now I live in a gated community and I'm like really pumped that I don't have to worry about that, but I still at night have fears that someone's in my apartment, like all the time. I check under the bed, I check in the closets. Like, I was like pretty fucked up after this happened. Like, I was already paranoid about something like that happening, and then it did. And it was my first apartment that I ever had by myself, so it was just really scary. And then after that I got robbed, which I made a video about. So I just didn't live in a good area. I'm really happy I don't have to worry about that anymore, but it was just so sad. I feel so bad for the woman. I don't want to butcher her name. It is Vibeke Rasmussen. She was very well known at Quincy College, and it's just a shame that this fucking idiotic, unstable 24-year-old just had mental problems that he didn't have taken care of, and he mutilated this woman, and it just wasn't right, and it was so uncalled for. Like, there's no argument that you could have that would have been like a crime of passion in 2 weeks of knowing someone like that. Like, it's just bizarre. So rest in peace to her. But yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to her family. My main lesson is, I want to tell you guys, I always have my door locked. I live in a gated community now. I don't even really need to worry, but I always have my door locked, like when I'm inside. And that's what I want to tell you guys, is please keep your doors locked when you're home, because that shit could happen to you. You know, at least if you're not home and your door is unlocked, your stuff could get stolen. But if you're home, someone walks into your apartment, something bad's probably going to happen to you. So you really need to be careful. Lock your doors. Like, I just really recommend it. And I can't believe that you know, if I had lived in a different building, like, would I have been that person? I don't know. It's just like really fucked up. So I just wanted to tell you guys that story. Like I said, no disrespect to her or her family. But it was really a scary and traumatizing event for everyone, I think, in that community. But yeah, I just wanted to tell you guys that whole story, because I feel like I left a lot of questions unanswered about like what happened with him and everything. So I don't want to say I hope you guys enjoy this video, but I hope that you like took something from it, and that you'll be aware, even though you don't think you have to be, you do have to be. So I guess I can tell you like a short story. Like, even when I was little, my mom said she saw someone walk up our stairs, turn the doorknob, and then they couldn't get in because it was locked, and they just walked down the stairs and went down the street. So I'm just telling you guys, you need to lock your doors at all times. I don't know why my mom never called the police like about that. That was so sketchy. But yeah, so just be careful, please. I don't want anything bad to happen to any of you, and people are crazy, so just be careful. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.